Family, Miss Heidi, appreciate that so very much. Grab your Bibles, join me in Ephesians chapter 5, if you will, Ephesians chapter 5. And did not get the second part of the outline out soon enough tonight, and so we'll have the ushers come forward. I believe they have some. So if you did not get one, it's part 2. We're going to finish up part 1, and so hopefully you can grab that, pull that out, and there are just a few of those left in the Welcome Center. And but we also have part 2, which we'll get to eventually. And so Ephesians chapter 5, you can join us there as we continue the series on music. Appreciate you being here tonight. I mean that so very much. I know life has gotten busy. It is the fall. Schools have kicked off and things like that. And so I appreciate you being here. And want to be respectful of your time, but excited about our study here on music and the encouragement, the challenge that it is. And so if you need one, and hopefully we have enough. If we don't, we'll try to make some copies, maybe some in the back, and have a few more here tonight than we had last Sunday, so I may not have made enough. Anyway, we'll get that to you, and hopefully, Lord willing, by the end of the service, everybody will have one. And Ephesians chapter 5. You'll look there. Let's review real quick, all right, as we're handing these out, and let's look at it. We start out in Ephesians chapter 5, if you remember. We made several statements here, and we just quickly go through, but it starts in verse 1, right? Be ye followers of God as dear children. And the next statement of verse number 2 says, to do that, to be that kind of follower, you walk in love, okay? And so we walk in love, and the verse we quoted this evening, Pastor Tony let us in, the love of Christ constraineth us, okay? His love for me, my love for him, both in that passage, the reality of what he did for me, and then in turn, my love now for him constrains me. And so that's very much the same thing. I'm going to walk now. We jump down there to verse number 8. It says, walk as children of light. Ye are the children of light, no longer of darkness. You're of the light, so we desire to walk as children of light. Well, how do you walk as children of light? Verse 10 says what? Proving what is that good and acceptable. So we're going to prove what is pleasing to God. That's my goal. This morning we heard the verse there in Psalm, let the words of my mouth and meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. So the fact is we're striving that every aspect of our lives be acceptable and pleasing to him. Why? Because we love God. That's really the only way to enter into any discussion about music or any other aspect of the Christian life where maybe my flesh wants something else or whatever the case may be. I have to enter in, okay, what pleases God? And I want that because I love God. So the love of God has to take priority over love of self in fulfilling that. We talked about that. That's kind of the groundwork, the foundation. Then we began looking at the aspect of the past of music, okay? The past, looking at it in different ways. First of all, we understood that the Bible is musical. We referenced the 500 references within Scripture. We talked at length about that. We'll not rehash it. Then we looked at, letter B, that God is musical. In the reality, we looked at some names, some things that describe him and his musicality, if we might describe it as such, and who he is and how he instructs you and I, Colossians 3:16, to have it as part of our exhortation, okay? We'll talk more about that in the future, all right? Young people, I will have the candy bucket, box, whatever you want to call it, up here, treasure chest, up here at the close of the service, and so listen up. If you have that outline filled out as much as we get, show me that, and you can have a piece of candy or a treat too. Letter C, we saw that Satan is musical. We talked about his creation and who he is and how God created him with an intimate knowledge of music. He obviously knows the power of music, and he's ready to employ that in his plot to dethrone God, render every Christian useless. And so very important tying this all together. Then last but not least, we looked at our world is musical. Our world is musical. It's all around us, and hopefully you maybe noted it a little bit more this week. You took note of it. It's like, wow, everything is about music. Put the music. It's impacting, right? We talked about how technology has allowed for its enhancement and so forth. We're daily impacted by that. Then we understood, after we looked at the past of music, we began talking about the power of music. How is music powerful? We looked at Corinthians 14 there, very great passage, speaking about the power of music to influence people. First thing that it can do is it sets the mood, right? It sets the mood. It produces a setting, and whether that's meditative, exciting, somber, romantic, you name it, music helps to set the mood. And we probably all used it in one way or the other to set the mood, to set the setting, if we might describe it as such, okay? We looked at some passages there, Solomon completing the temple. Again, we won't rehash everything we looked at last time. One of the great examples is silent movies, right? And that screen up there, someone on a piano or something down in front, or musical instruments, and they're playing music to create the mood as you watch the thing, and ties into what you see. And again, we won't rehash that. And the last thing we made note of, and we talked about throughout the series, we'll quote quote some folks that we certainly don't endorse. We don't encourage just maybe musicians of old, whatever the case may be. One was by Jimi Hendrix talking about atmospheres coming through the music. Okay? And understand, as we continue our discussion here, the reality is he's speaking about the music, the tune, the music play, not necessarily the lyrics, and he calls it a spiritual thing of his own. Now, why does he call it a spiritual thing of its own? Because it speaks to the Spirit, right? It has something for the Spirit. It affects the Spirit. It influences. It helps set that mode in that sense. Okay, so that's where I figured out that was a very quick review of a lot that we covered last week. All right, so get on YouTube or wherever, the website, and you can watch it if you weren't here, fill in all the rest of the blanks. Okay, now we move on to the rest of part 1 and into part 2, okay? You see there, number 4. As we look at it, even the secular world acknowledges the influence of music on our emotions, And the fact that music can be so impactful in how we feel, right? There's an article I share with you, a quote from it. The title of the article is Pulling Our Brain Strings, and it speaks to the world's knowledge of music's impact on our emotions, our feelings, and eventually our actions. Notice some of the statements made within this quote, and boy, there's a lot of powerful things here, but notice what it says. Music's impact on emotion is more than just a widely held assumption. It's a phenomenon, a reality, you could read into that has drawn a fair amount of scientific research. Published in journals concerned with everything from neurobiology to consumer behavior. Now notice this statement. It's actually such a powerful and versatile stimulus that some laboratories use music as the primary tool to study emotion. In other words, to manipulate emotion, to bring out emotion. The next statement that goes on, the quote, unlike visual stimuli like pictures and video or smell prompts, music samples or musical samples provoke strong and consistent response in test subjects, can be used to induce both pleasant and unpleasant responses, and can be manipulated fairly easily among mood-altering parameters like tempo and mode. Now, my friend, I'm not musical, and you may not be either, but the reality is this. You can understand what they're saying, that music is powerful. I like that last statement because he makes it clear. You can manipulate it along mood-altering parameters, the tempo, the mode, and other things, rhythm, things within that to affect the mode. So you can manipulate those, arrange them in such a way to affect the mood. And it goes far beyond that, and because mankind has come to the realization, we can take advantage of this. Let's use music to influence people to get them to do what we want to do, if we might put it that way. One of the great examples was a company that started several decades ago, and they were the leading, the top leading in the industry within producing music for offices, stores, you name it. They produced music that you heard overhead. Okay, and the name of the company was, it's kind of interesting, is Muzak, okay, M-U-Z-A-K, Muzak. Now, they ended up, a bunch of other companies came out, and by 2009, they were on the down, ended up bankrupt at some point, but they were the first ones, many decades ago, and they understood that music can be used. In fact, they sold their music to businesses in the reality that they could, in turn, manipulate customers. They could influence and impact the mood of customers, and then control them in some sense. Now listen, that's kind of interesting. You see it there on your outline. They built the thriving business on the idea of music's power to what? Set the mood and atmosphere, okay? To set it, whether it be a Burger King or whether it be a Walmart or whatever the case may be, that they understood, okay, we can use music to impact people who are inside these stores. Listen to what they're from their own website. Here's a statement that they made. I like how they describe it as audio architecture. Okay, there's one of their vans and say, Pastor Henry, you're making that up. No, there is actually a company like that. Okay, and they describe it as audio architecture. I like that, as I said, is emotion by design. Isn't that an amazing statement? Listen, we're creating music to create motion. We're influencing, bringing out emotion in folks. Audio architecture is emotion by design. Our innovation and our inspiration is the integration of music, voice, and sound to create experiences that link customers with companies. Its power lies in its subtlety. It bypasses the resistance of the mind and targets the receptiveness of the what? The heart. Look at it. He said, listen, as they write it, we're going to write music in such a way that it bypasses the restrictiveness of the mind, and we're going to hit the heart. We're going to gun for it so that we impact these customers in the stores. Okay, when people are made to feel good in, say, a store, they feel good about that store. I like this store. I can stay here. I can spend money in this store. Is the impact that they're trying for. They like it. They remember it. They go back to it. Look at the rest of the quote. Music translates that image into a language that speaks to the heart. Now, some of you may be saying, "Oh, Pastor Henry, we're getting way too deep in this." Can I just tell you, music is powerful. You got to understand how powerful it is so that you and I can make a correct biblical understanding and discernment in what we listen to. Because music is powerful. The world knows it. The world will use it. And if the world uses it, you can be sure the devil will. If he knows music, he's going to use it much the same way as mankind may use it. It's a scientific approach to the use of music to set a mood or atmosphere. What's the science behind it? Well, they kind of go on to describe it, and I won't get too much deeper, but I like this statement that they make. Music is scientifically engineered engineered sound. It's functional music rather than entertainment. In other words, it does something. It has a purpose to accomplish. Now, that's interesting. They even realize we're creating this so that it accomplishes something. It sets the mood in one way or the other. It affects those who hear it, but does not require a conscious living or listening effort. The Muzak Corporation goes on to call themselves specialists in physiological and psychological effects and application of music. That's a powerful statement there in and of itself. They understand what they're doing. And they draw on the historical use of frequency as well as research work of their founder. His name was Dan O'Neill. They create, quote, a programmed environment for applications in office, factories, banks, and shops to keep Muzak's effectiveness. They use what they call stimulus progression, a system which provides people with a psychological lift, a subconscious sense of forward movement achieved through programming sound in 15-minute blocks. Within each of these segments, tunes are ordered from least to most stimulating, and they make this last statement: the stimulus value of each segment is determined by factors such as tempo, rhythm, instrumentation, and orchestra size. So they understand, and do not miss it. I say all that to say this. Here's a living example. Every single one of us have been in a store, we've been in a restaurant, and we've heard music playing. Okay? The design behind it, somewhere along the way, they decide, you know what, let's stop producing this for entertainment, and let's start producing it in such a way that it's a functionality. In other words, we can use music, and you know what they do? And there's been great studies on it and so forth. In restaurants, they will often play a string of music that is faster during lunchtime and dinner time. You know why? Make you eat faster. If they make you eat faster, what happens? You're done, you get out, more people can come sit down. So it's amazing. So you go in Walmart, and guess what? They go to the store. You think they want you out of there quick? Nope. So they play some nice slow music. Make you happy, content. Oh, I like that. That'll look good on me. To influence and impact. Make you stay a while. Spend more money. And they understand we can affect this through music. Pretty amazing. Power of music. We've come up as humans to the understanding, and we've come to that we can manipulate music to manipulate the emotions and set the mood. We can impact people. So we have already, as a world, as human beings, started to use this. Now, you see number 5 there, carrying that thought. Music affects our spirit. It affects our emotions, our feelings. Well-known songwriter. Let me skip ahead. Let me not get too far behind, okay? A well-known song writer once wrote this, and this is a great statement. He said, words make you think a thought. That's true. We can all admit that as we say words, a phrase, a statement, it ought to conjure something in our minds. Then he goes on and he makes this statement: music makes you feel a feeling. Communicates and sets the mood. It affects the emotions. And a song puts them together. And notice this statement. Don't miss it. Makes you feel a thought. Makes you feel a thought. And I like that because that is a powerful statement. It's saying that music has a unique ability to connect the head and the heart. There's a combination there of thinking a thought with feeling a thought. That's what music does. Why is music so powerful? Why do we see that God even used it? Because music is powerful. It can affect us. We can double the feeling of what I am saying by getting someone up here, okay? And I'm not trying to be silly or anything like that, but we all have seen or heard of the churches that there's someone sitting at the piano while the pastor's preaching. Okay? And they just play a few chords or notes as the pastor's preaching. I don't know about you, for someone ADHD like me, that's so distracting. It does not work. But what are they doing? They're just adding a little bit to the thought. Okay, the words create a thought, and the music creates a feeling, and so they're trying to produce, in a sense, you feeling a thought. Now, I'm not for that. I don't think that adds to it. I don't think that's a great thing to do, but that's reality, okay? But they're trying to create you and I feeling a thought. That happens everywhere. Music is powerful. It's going to impact us. From television to Hollywood to out in stores, they will use it to do just that. Gives us a glimpse into the power of music, okay? It has a great ability to influence our emotions. Now, it's not a new revelation, because sometimes some of us think, well, this whole music debate, I hate calling it a debate, it's not a debate, this whole music discussion came along in the 60s and the 70s when rock music came on in America and really started to take off, and fundamental independence started getting all up in arms over and so forth. Listen, okay, this reality of how powerful music is and was did not just come around in the last 100 years. Music has always been around and has been powerful and influential, has been able to be used to set the mood and do other things that demonstrate its power. Most of us have heard of Aristotle, okay? Certainly not a believer. Secular philosophist, if you want to describe him as such, and many other things. Aristotle made an interesting observation about music. Notice what he said. This is what Aristotle said many, many years ago, right? Before the life of Christ by a couple centuries. He said this: music directly represents the passions or states of the soul. How does he describe these passions or states of the soul? Gentleness, anger, courage, temperance. If a person habitually listens to the kind of music that rouses ignoble passions, his whole character will be shaped to an ignoble form. He goes on. In short, if one listens to the wrong kind of music, he will become the wrong kind of person. But conversely, if he listens to the right kind of music, he will tend to become the right kind of person. If I read that for some people, they say, oh yeah, that's a Baptist preacher. Listen to the wrong kind of music, you're going to be a wrong person. Listen to the right kind, you're going to turn to the right brand. Amen. Aristotle? Aristotle, a humanist, secular philosophist? Yeah. Why? He understood the power of music. And how crazy for you and I, how ignorant for you and I to say, music, it's not that big of a deal. It's neutral. It doesn't have power. It's not going to affect me for the best. Really? Even the world understands it can, and it does. So that's a straw man that many people offer up. Martin Luther, some 1,800 years later after Aristotle, Martin Luther, a believer, listen to what he said. He gave this observation for us. For whether you wish to comfort the sad, to terrify the happy. I'm reading that, I'm like, really? Martin Luther, you like to terrify the happy? Anyway, I don't know what kind of music I would do. To terrify the happy, to encourage the despairing, to humble the proud, to calm the passionate, or to appease those full of hate. Notice it. And who could number all these masters of the human heart, namely the emotions, inclinations, and affections that impel men to evil or good. So he's describing what he just described as the inclinations, the effects, the emotions. What more effective means than music could you find? Wow. I like that, to impel them, to move people to evil or good. You know what both of these men are saying? That eventually music impacts not only your emotions, and it impacts your thinking, and it will impact your doing. It has that power. It will impact you. I find it interesting. Many of you know at different times when our government has besieged something. For me, in my generation, it was David Koresh, right, down in Waco, Texas. And you remember what they did there? They surrounded his whole place, and they put up huge lights. And what else did they do? Played music, blared music around the clock. Why? Because of the psychological effect. The effect it had on the emotions on the people inside, wanting them to surrender to the government and saying, hey, give up, come out, you're in despair, you have no hopes. They literally played music to influence the people inside. The power of music. Our military, those called out to go and handle that situation. And our government thought, you know what better way to impact them and influence them? Play some music. Use the power of music. It'll influence their emotions. It will eventually affect their thinking, and then we can impact their doing. My friend, music is powerful. See, humans all down through the ages, they've come to the realization that when you're looking for something to set the mood, when you want to make a setting that indeed touches the emotions, that maybe influences people to not only think a thought, but to feel a thought, music is your best option. Now, can I just encourage you, could you listen, young people especially? If mankind in our finite knowledge and understanding of music and such, if we have come to the point where we can manipulate, use music to do that, don't you think Satan, who was created with an intimate knowledge of music, can do the same thing? Can he not in some way say, okay, I'm going to take a good thing, like he's tried with marriage, like he's tried with gender, like he's tried with many other things, and I'm going to confuse everybody by throwing bad things in there? And so he has with music. And certainly something that he knows very, very well. Now, number two, not only sets a mood, provides a setting, but letter B on our outline, and we're still on part one, letter outline. 1B, it sends a message. It sends a message. We're here in Ephesians chapter 5. Let's look at verse number 19, okay? Verse number 19. I'm a literalist, so I read the scriptures literally, because I believe that's how God would have us to do it. And notice verse number 19 of Ephesians chapter 5. Notice the statement, okay? Speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your hearts to the Lord. I love that statement because of the first word. In fact, the first phrase, speaking to yourselves, okay? Speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs. You know what God says in this? Don't miss this, okay? Speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, okay? God says that music speaks. Music speaks. Now, you don't have to admit it, okay? But how many of you actually talk to yourself? You don't have to admit it. Don't raise your hand. I talk to myself. And I have a go-to phrase when someone catches me talking to myself. You know, when they give you that look like you're a madman, and they're like, are you talking to yourself? And so I cop out and I say a very prideful statement. I say some of the best conversations I've ever had is with myself. And so that's not nice. But anyway, yeah, that just kind of covers the fact that I was talking to myself. Okay? Many of us talk to ourselves. Why do you talk to yourself? Sometimes it helps you remember something, right? Okay, now I got to do this, and I don't forget this, and do that. You talk to yourself. You remind yourself. You speak to yourself for a benefit, a means. You're communicating a message. Now, if we come along to you and you're speaking to yourself, and you're like, yeah, we're going to be worried. Unless you're 6 months or younger. Okay, you're babbling. You think there's no point to that. Just speaking, just kind of, we got to call somebody. Call the white coats. Okay. There's no point to that. It's not doing anything. The same thing is true here in the Scripture. You and I just don't sing to sing. We don't use the hymns that we use for just because we got to find something to sing. No, we are speaking to ourselves. We're encouraging ourselves. We're sending a message to ourselves through the songs that we sing. We communicate. And literally, that's what music does. So crucial for us not to ignore the reality that music has a message to give. You see, God intends it to speak for a specific purpose and with a specific message. The verse dictates it. Many others we could look at too. The examples of music, as we say, that they try to speak to the heart. And it amazes me in their control of music to get you to stay longer, to get you to leave, to get you to spend more money, and so forth. Different places. In the office, they would often put together a string of those 15-minute periods in office that would just cause you to just be on edge and to work faster and harder. And it's pretty amazing. It influenced the workers in the office, as was their design, and it was effective. Many companies subscribe to it in that sense. Why? Okay? Because music is just like language in that it communicates. It doesn't need lyrics, the words to communicate. The music communicates simply by itself. It does something. And I told you, the easiest way to know that music communicates, watch little children when you play certain kinds of music. You ever seen them start to wiggle? Start to move in response to music? I had a good black brother in my master's class, and he and I were talking about music once, and he was down from the South, and I love his description. We were talking about music and what kind is good and so forth. We were talking about some of the sociological influences of different groups of people, ethnicities, and things like that. Anyway, as we were talking, he goes, well, I always fall back on my one thing that I can tell. If the music touches or hits my foot before it hits my heart, I know it's wrong. I like that. It's pretty good. In other words, it gets to his body, affects him physically such a way before it touches his spirit, his heart, in a good way. See, music communicates. It says things to us. It affects us, and it doesn't need the lyrics to do so. Hollywood knows that, okay? You watch a scary movie, they're going to play scary music to send the message that something bad is about to happen, okay? Some of you're watching a show, and all of a sudden the scary music comes on. What do? Why? Because it tells you something bad's going to happen. Okay? The rest of us, we're watching a Hallmark movie and all the sappy music, and you think, ooh, that's what we do. Okay, the music communicates, all right? It tells us something's going to happen. It's sending a message that, a clear message, what's transpiring, what it's trying to do. Music communicates. And it communicates to every part of who we are. Do not forget that. Every part of us. Our mind, our body, our spirit, our heart, our emotions. And boy, is it powerful in that way. It's powerful. Turn with me to Exodus chapter 32, if you will. Exodus chapter 32. We might not have much more time after this. We'll see. Exodus chapter 32. Look with me in this passage. Exodus chapter 32. We'll look down in verses 17 and 18. Notice it, if you will, 32, 17, and 18. Okay? And when Joshua, okay, so let's just set the table before we go on any further. Joshua and Moses coming down from the mountain. They've received the tablets. They've received the law of God. They're heading back down to the Israelites that have been alone for some time, right? We know the passage. We know the back story. And when Joshua heard, verse number 17, heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said unto Moses, there's noise of war in the camp. Verse 18, and he said, it is not the voice of them that are about for mastery, or that shout, for mastery. Neither is it the voice of them that cry for being overcome, defeated, but the noise of them that sing do I hear. Now, that's interesting, okay? So let's step back. Let's understand where we're at, okay? They're coming down towards the camp. All of a sudden, they hear noise come up from the camp, and literally it's the noise of music. They know in some reality it's that, and because they obviously identify it singing at some point, okay? First of all, Joshua was like, man, it sounds like fighting. It sounds like a war's going on, a battle. Okay, a battle royal. I mean, it's going on. All right, the noise, the shouting, and everything else. Man, it really does not sound like anything I have heard before. Now, let's stop there a second. Don't miss that. Don't you think Joshua's been around when the Israelites have worshiped God in front of the mountain, in front of the temple or the place of meeting at that point, their temple at that point, but where they've gathered to worship? Don't you think some of the Israelites have sung unto God, have worshiped God in song already? Joshua would know what that sounds like. But here Joshua comes down from the mountain. He goes, what is this sound? It sounds like war. It sounds like a battle going on down there in the camp. And he said, verse number 18, notice it, he gets a little closer. He listens a little bit more succinctly to what's going on. And it sounds like a war or battle, but its voice is making the sound of singing. It's not people in battle. And then they turned the corner, and what do they see? Look at verse number 19. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. And Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. He comes down, they see the idol worship, they see the worldliness, much of what they carried out of Egypt, and this a very immoral, likely dancing and such that took place as part of worship in their minds of this idol, the calf. And as Aaron had said, behold, the God that brought you out of Egypt, concerning that golden calf and such. And all of a sudden we have this situation where Moses and Joshua come down on the camp. The noise in and of itself has communicated something to Joshua. It hasn't communicated, there's a church service going on. That's not what it communicated. It did not say, it must be, is it the Sabbath? Have we gathered to worship? No, that's not what he thought. He comes down, and what they were doing gave him more the noise of war and of battle. Can I tell you right now, listen to me. Your music sends a message. Sends a message. It sends a message. It communicates something. In this case, it communicated to Joshua and Moses, boy, there's something wrong going on. There's a battle war. It sounds like they're fighting. That's shouting, but man, is that singing too all mixed together? What in the world is going on? And as we see here on the outline, if we might put it as such, the Israelites have a real-life flashback to the worldliness they had just left, from which they had been delivered. They too were called to be different, to be separate as you and I are. Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 11, I believe it is, you and I are called not to have fellowship. If we walk as children of light, we're not supposed to have fellowship with the darkness. And see, they too were called to be different. However, they were doing things like the world. They were committing ungodly acts of idolatry and such, licentiousness. They were using music to do what? Set the mood. Their music matched the mood, or it helped produce a mood that was for worshiping idols, that was for dancing licentiously, that was a reality of what they were creating in the moment. And that is the noise that Joshua and Moses heard. It sent a message to Joshua and to Moses. It was clear in what it sent as a message. It communicated a message. It set the mood for their indulgence in righteous living and idol worship. My friend, can I tell you, music always has a message, and it helps to set the mood. What is your music doing? What kind of message, the music you listen to, does it send? Number 2 here under letter B, you see quickly, there was back in the 60s a very ungodly, evil, wicked man. His name was Timothy Leary. He was somewhat of a New Age guru. He was also an author, a psychologist. He pushed drugs and other things. Well, he made a statement. He made this. He knew the power of music. Here's what he said about that. Don't listen to the words. It's the music that has its own message. He realized, sometimes we try to take the world's music, add good Christian words, and we think, that's great. Well, here is someone from the world saying, wait a second, our music has a message. Christians, you hear me? Someone from the world saying, our music has a message. Even without the lyrics, it has a message. It communicates something. You see, we are dealing with just the music, apart from the lyrics, even at this point. It's powerful in the message that it can send. Last but not least, look at number 3, if you will. Okay, here. Let's go back. This should be number... No, I'm way too far ahead. I'm sorry. Let's go back here. Here's number 3. This is world-famous conductor Leonard Bernstein. He says this, and concerning music, the language of it that speaks to the heart. Notice what he says. Music doesn't have to pass through the censor of the brain before it can reach the heart. It means emotions. An F sharp doesn't have to be considered in the mind. It is a direct hit. Doesn't have to be considered in the mind. Doesn't have to go through that filter, he's saying. It's a direct hit, and therefore, and I love this statement. This is on the edition, by the way. Therefore, all the more powerful. Did you catch it? Let me repeat it real quickly. Music doesn't have to pass through the censor of the brain before it can reach the heart and the emotions. It can affect us in ways that maybe we don't think about. Maybe we don't allow to go through the filter of our brain. That F sharp doesn't have to be considered in the mind. It is a direct hit, and therefore all the more powerful. A direct hit on the emotions. It sends a message to the body, the spirit of the person, that demands that we ask of our music, or that we ask, or even apart from the lyrics, what message is the music I listen to sending? What is it sending? He makes a great statement here, and all of these do, to paint the picture that it's hard to argue that music doesn't send a message. So if it does, and I think that we've provided enough material, and there's other scriptures we could look at. There's certainly other sources out in the world, though we would not give them nearly as much credence as the Word of God. But that would say, okay, music, on a level basis, it sets a mood and it sends a message. So if that is the case, and we have to be honest and say, yeah, music sends a message, what is it sending? What message is my music sending to others who pull up next to me in my vehicle, and maybe they hear my music? Maybe somebody who, whatever, is listening. What kind of message is it sending to me? My heart, is it affecting me for a positive way spiritually, or is it affecting me negatively spiritually? When we say spiritually, what do we mean? A right spirit with God, in communion and fellowship with Him. Boy, music is powerful. We'll see more in the weeks to come and how that is true and how it plays out in our life. You'll join me in standing. Grab your hymn book on your way out, and we'll want to get